Well, the four suspects in the killings of those two Mississippi police officers set to appear in court this hour. What lies ahead for them, though, remains to be seen. We're trying to keep an eye on it, seeing why this keeps happening, why so many officers keep dying after a recent wave of police killings, not just in Mississippi, but in New York and in Idaho. Shootings that do not seem to be getting the same nonstop press coverage. Why is that? Some controversial police incidents do. Now, I am in no way trying to minimize any of those deaths, just the fact that families are hurting no matter who's killed. But former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani wants to know, where's the outrage over these officers' deaths? Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. Right now to Mayor Rudy Giuliani. There does seem to be, at least stepping back in the eyes of the media, Mayor, a sort of a double standard here. And it's fine to cover the deaths on the other sides and other cities, but almost no coverage outside of those cities of officers killed in those cities.
It's outrageous. I mean, these are in almost every one of these situations, these are officers. In fact, I think in every situation, these are officers who are brave officers, great records, putting their lives at risk to save other people. They lost their lives because they were out there on the streets trying to protect you and me. There's something very, very special about that. And when they lose their lives, there's a real attack on civilization and law and decency. And
especially when they seem to become targets. Now, we don't know all the details about Mississippi.
Right.
We do
know the one in New York.
We know the one in New York.
And Ramos and Lou, they were assassinated.
So I guess what I'm getting at, do you see the police holding back as a result of this? And now, and we're going to deal with this later in the show, suits to hold them back, that all of a sudden, however they went about doing their business, their hands.
You know, I think I know policing as well as anyone for a lot of reasons, including all my life until I became a mayor, and four uncles who were police officers. I grew up in a family of police officers. The average police officer will hold back. That extra special brave police officer, he's gonna go forward no matter what. But like any army or group of police officers or group of employees at a bank, a lot of people are average, and they're going to be saying to themselves, "If I make a mistake, look what happens to me. What happened to me, the poor officer in Ferguson, right? That officer in Ferguson just did his job. He chased a guy who held up a convenience store and tried to bang him in the face and tried to take his gun. Had he stayed in that car and not pursued him, he shouldn't be a police officer. So that man just did his job, and to a large extent, it looks like his life has been ruined, even though he wasn't even indicted for a crime. So that has to enter the mind of the average police officer.
So what do you think when at the highest level, though, Rudy, you get the Attorney General of the United States exploring how the Baltimore police operate?
Well, I always made my police officers feel, and firefighters, I have your back. I'm there for you. If you get into a controversial situation, I'm not walking out just because, you know, the New York Times gets angry at me. I think we got the opposite going on now in a lot of places, which is, sure, they got the back of the police officer, but it's a stab him in the back. Let's get all outraged before we even know the facts. Look, I mean, Ferguson is a totally false scenario for 1 month, month and a half. Hands up, never happened. Shot in the back, total perjury. Man was charging the car, corroborated by 7 witnesses, at least 5 of whom were African American, including one man who came forward on his own.
And what do you say to, in light of this, and in light of these latest policemen killed in Mississippi, that there's more black-on-black crime? There are more officers who have targeted white assailants, but all these numbers get drowned out.
It's trying to escape some of the hard realities. You know, and the thing that brought it home to me most was Baltimore, when several of the elected officials, several of whom have been there for like 30 and 40 years, and their political party, the Democratic Party, has been running Baltimore for 40 years, they started saying, it's because of the terrible conditions here. Well, I really kind of lost my temper on watching that on television. I said, well, you should resign. If that's the case, then you should resign and turn the city over to somebody who can turn it around. Because if I had to go complaining when I was mayor because of the terrible conditions here, New York Times would have ripped me apart. I got elected to change the terrible conditions.
The New York Times ripped you apart regardless.
We had a riot in Washington Heights under David Dinkins. 4 days of rioting. Then we had a blackout 5 years later in Washington Heights. We'd have a single crime. So I didn't have to stand up and say, oh, it's because of the terrible community here that we have this much crime. I could stand up and say, I turned this community around.
Well, how would you deal with the rogue
and
officers? But how would you deal with the rogue officers who go a little too far?
Well, officers who go too far, I would do what I did when I was a prosecutor and mayor. I put them in jail. The officer who attacked Abner Lewimmer is in jail for 25 years. Officer Lavoti is in jail. I personally oversaw the prosecution for the now commission of 70 police officers. I consider police officers who act illegally worse than anybody else. But then again, I see the loss of a police life as something worse in a certain way, because it's an attack on all of us. I'm not going to go out tonight and patrol the streets of New York protecting you and me and my children and your children, but a bunch of other guys are. And if they lose their lives doing that, that should be a major, major event. The President of the United States should get at least as upset about that as the phony story in Ferguson that got them all upset. And that story was a phony story. It turned out to be completely untrue. And you don't hear anybody saying that. It is not true that he held his hands up. It is not true that he was shot in the back. It is not true that that was an unjustifiable shooting. He charged the police officer. I've read every single piece of that grand jury testimony that's been released. There are 7 witnesses who corroborate the police officer.
No, you're right about that. Many have corroborated. In the case of Baltimore, do you think that even if these officers were involved in screwing up procedure and didn't know, is it a leap in your mind to charge a couple of them with second-degree murder?
Don't know. Does it seem like it? Yes. First of all, to make it a racial incident is absurd, since I think 3 of the police officers and the primary defendant is African American.
Right.
Does Baltimore have the right police procedures? Did they follow the right police procedures? Does that amount to murder? I don't know. I mean, there seems to be some degree of overcharging involved, but they may be completely innocent. They may be guilty. I don't know. But it seems to me that the case got prejudged. Here's what I do know. When a trial begins, they'll be presumed innocent, and I do think it needs a change of venue. It would seem to me that that's the case.
Get it out of Baltimore.
Oh, come on. How could they possibly get a fair trial in Baltimore when a jury would be worried that should we come back with an acquittal, the same thing that happened in Baltimore, a couple weeks ago or a week ago could happen again.
But as you know, Mayor, whether it's in Baltimore or in another locale, let's say the officers are exonerated and let off, then there's fears of new riots. Well, as was the case of the Rodney King riots. Remember that? We
don't convict people because we're afraid of riots.
Understood. But if how would you, as mayor or leader in these various areas,
there just wouldn't be a riot. You'd like to make me mayor of Baltimore? There wouldn't be a riot.
What would you do?
I would have so many police there you couldn't possibly have a riot. You couldn't have one. The minute you threw a rock, you'd be arrested. The minute you threw a stone, you'd be arrested. The minute you tried to burn something, you'd be arrested. And
where would you draw the line? Someone picking up anything, or someone like getting right in your face?
Right in your face is okay. If it gets threatening, you get arrested.
What's threatening? Verbally threatening?
Battery is hitting. Assault is threatening. So
you would round up those who threatened or cursed at cops?
It depends. It depends.
Yeah.
Now, police officers have to use some discretion there. I would let them yell and scream and make all the noise they wanted. That's what I always told my police officers.
What about those who throw red paint at an officer or a police chief?
Like Police Brad.
Right,
arrested immediately. That's assault and battery, and you go to jail. You should go to jail for 2 or 3 years for that. For throwing paint at somebody. First of all, you could blind somebody with paint.
You're right.
I mean, you throw a rock, you can kill somebody with a rock. To have, like they had in Baltimore, like we used to have in New York before I became mayor with the 2 riots in Crown Heights and Washington Heights, cooling off periods where hundreds of cars were burned and stores looted. This is absurd. You stop it right away.
Do you think this city, and I know we have to go on your press for time, crime is revisiting us. We had 2 Central Park incidents over the weekend, more incidents reported in Times Square.
I have great confidence in our police.
But are you worried? We're hearing more of this stuff.
Of course I'm worried.
Why do you think it's happening now?
I'm worried. I was more worried when the mayor's rhetoric was anti-police back around Christmas time. And I see in Mayor de Blasio a little bit better rhetoric now, a little bit more support for the police. I don't see the same anger, so maybe I'm feeling a little bit better about it. But, I want to see a year go by before I can give you a real assessment of that.
Mayor, very good seeing you. Very powerful, too.
Thank you.
Rudy Giuliani. Meanwhile, back to Baltimore, attorneys for 6 officers facing charges in the death of Freddie Gray filing motions to have the state's attorney recuse herself. They say Marilyn Mosby needs to be removed due to conflicts of interest, citing, among other things, her friendship with the Gray family's attorney and her husband, who sits on the city council and has been very vocal on this issue. Now, one of the lawyers telling us today, those motions alone speak for themselves, to Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Anna Napolitano, on even if she can be removed. What do you think, Judge?
You know, it's very difficult, Neil, to remove an elected public official from the job to which she was elected. It's not like she was appointed to that position, and her election is relatively recent, and she's relatively green and inexperienced as a prosecutor. Unlike Mayor Giuliani, who was one of the great prosecutors on the federal level in New York City, and even when he was a senior official in the Justice Department. This young woman is relatively new in this job, but she is the person the people have chosen at a popular election. Sometimes lawyers make motions, applications to the court, not because they expect to win those applications, but because they want to start a dialogue on the subject matter of them. So I think that these lawyers for these 6 police officers have started a dialogue on the propriety of this person in her job, but essentially that is a political dialogue, not a legal one. So
well, I think what they're saying, Judge, is that her comments that day really incited a bias the likes of which they can't recall. Particularly, they're referring to Mosby charging the officers to quell the Baltimore unrest, saying, and I quote here, "I heard you call for no justice, no peace. Your peace is sincerely needed as I work to deliver justice on behalf of this young man." She went on to say, "You're at the forefront of this cause, and as young people, our time is now." In other words, that she politically glorified it, and lawyers for these policemen are saying that is going way overboard.
Well, I agree with them on that. That language is reprehensible. And sometimes prosecutors get a little carried away with statements they make in support of their
But does that come back
case.
to bite her, Judge? In other words, could that be enough on those grounds to say, come on, you're a prosecutor, you have no right to talk like that?
No, I don't think so. But I understand why they are starting that dialogue, because there's a group of people out there who will become the jurors in this case. And they want this sort of attitude on the part of the prosecutor to be cognizant in the minds of the potential jurors. But I don't think it's enough to remove her. I'll give you an example. If a judge had expressed such harsh, mob-generated views, the judge would be disqualified from hearing the case. But the prosecutor is supposed to zealously address her cause, and that's what she's doing. Do I think she's a good prosecutor? I mean, that remains to be seen. She's brand new in the office. She's never had a case like this. She'll probably never have one of this magnitude for the rest of her career, wherever it takes her. But the people of Maryland have chosen to have elected prosecutors rather than appointed ones. They tend to be more political than appointed prosecutors. They tend to be less professional. But that's what the Constitution of the state of Maryland has given to the people of Baltimore. And that's whom the voters have chosen.
That's very interesting. All right, Judge, you always are. I appreciate it, my friend. Anna Napolitano. All right, to the Saudi snub over our deal with Iran. Why this general's worried the sheik's just about to hit the fan.